everyone, and welcome back to Baron's Den for the final roster and rules changes overview, where we look back at what we've talked about with all of the different rosters, some of the rules as well, and just have our final thoughts and see if we need to rethink perhaps some of the ones we've already discussed. So this is it, the last roster video until I'm going to leave it a couple of weeks until I've got the rule book and I've had a chance to digest it a bit more, and then we'll perhaps go into more detail with each individual team. So yeah, let's gather our final thoughts. So this is how I ended up, having done the Bretonians as well. I can't really put them into winners and losers. So this is not any sort of tiering. This is just if I've thought they've got better or worse. But obviously I've had a little bit of time to think, and we're going to make a couple of little changes. So what I've done here is I've moved, first of all, I've moved Necromantic Horror from the golden up to the green, because I thought, actually, let's go back. The reason I thought the change was so good is because they didn't lose out on anything. They just made the same gains that the Undead team made, but, well, most of them anyway. But they didn't lose anything like the Undead team, and I thought that was amazing at the time. I've since thought about it, and I thought regen on the ghouls is good for the necromantic players, particularly when it comes to their team building, but it's not game changing at all. And if you watch any of my Bonehead Podcast League matches, you'll see that regen is far from a given. Mine just always tends to fail. So was it really that much of a buff? It is definitely welcome, but yeah, I'm not sure it's game changing. And the same goes for eye gouge, really. Eye gouge, you're requiring that you actually want to be blocking with your zombies, which you don't always. You've then got to activate the push, which you might get a POW and knock the person down anyway, which is even better. And then, of course, they're only gouged until you activate them. So it's good. There's going to be times where you're going to be really grateful for it, but once again, it's not game changing really. So there's no doubt that these things have improved Necromantic Horror, but I don't think enough to be here now. Equally, I've moved Amazons over to here because I didn't know about the change to break tackle when I first placed them. And obviously, their roster hasn't changed much, but the pure fact that Amazon blocker can now move in to a cage or through a screen and use break tackle to get through on a, what would that be, a 1+ with a reroll, is pretty... well, it's 1+ with a reroll before tackle zones. So that could take you down to a 4+. Which is not bad, is it? A 4+ with a reroll to get your... And particularly if it's got block and maybe guard as well, that could be a nightmare. The only other change is I've actually moved Imperial Nobility into the golden up as well, because I didn't know about the retainers improving their agility as well, which again, on its own, isn't necessarily massive, but the buffs that team has seen, I think, are quite substantial, and they have improved a lot, in my opinion. So that's roughly where I thought they sat with their comparison to the last version of the game. So what I decided to do is, this is not like an actual tier list, because I'm not qualified to do a tier list. I'm not a TO, and this is just my opinion of just roughly where the teams sit. We all know that team value plays such an important role, but particularly as we don't know what team value is going to be like, especially with the new elite skills. We can theorise, but until we play the game, we won't know for sure. But I thought it's a bit of fun to loosely put them. So at the moment, I'm going for the top grouping being Amazon, Undead, and Underworld Denizens. I do predict that those three teams will be three of the strongest teams coming out of the gates. And then other strong teams, I think, will be Necromantic Horror and Wood Elf. Older Alliance have moved up here now. They wouldn't have been there before. I think Orcs are going to sit where they usually sit. I don't think they'll change much. I think that Vampires will still be up there. And Lizards and Dark Elves, and I think Imperial Nobility will join them. In that middle tier, so this would be like the lower end of Tier 1 or the top end of Tier 2. You've got the Norse. They haven't changed much, and I think this is roughly where they've been put, so I'll leave them there. Dwarves, I think, coming down a little bit into this grouping. Some people would put them lower, I know, but I think once we start getting used to them, they'll sit about here. Same with the Skaven. Tomb Kings, I think they could be up here, but until we get some new games, until we get some games in with some of the new skills, I'm just going to be cautious and put them there. Bretonians, I do think are going to be a bit better than humans at the moment, but not as good as Imperial Nobility. So I've kind of kept them there. And Chaos Dwarf, I mean, I still rate the Chaos Dwarfs even with those changes, and I think they'll be in the middle somewhere. And then finally, we've got the last two tiers, which is going to be the bottom end of tier 2 and then the stunted tier, really. So we've got Elven Union humans who've both taken hits with their positionals. Black Orcs, this is where they're normally to be found, and I do think they're going to be better, closer to these other teams, and closer to these teams as well, but still not enough to get out. And then we've got Nurgle, Khorne, Chaos Chosen, Chaos Renegades, who I think the elite skill tax is going to hurt them developing the way they used to. I think if we were talking about high TV, I'd definitely move them up a bit. But for now, I'm being cautious and leaving them in this gap. But for sure, Nurgle are going to be closer than they were early on in the last game. And then I've actually put Snotling and Goblin out of the stunted tier and into this tier because I think they'll be mixing it with these teams with the changes that we've seen made. And then finally, I've got Ogre, Gnomes, and Halflings. And I feel like Ogres could have a tier for themselves because I think they're going to be better than the Gnomes and the Halflings, but not as good as the Snotlings and Goblins. So that's just one arrangement of these teams. Shall we have a look at another one? So this one, I've made a few changes to think about. Well, have I over-exaggerated some teams and undervalued others? So in this one, I've moved Necromantic and Old World Alliance into the top and had kind of like a top 5. Imperial Nobility, I pushed back into here. Was I being overly ambitious with them? Norse, I kind of swapped Imperial Nobility with Norse because actually on their day, Norse can be pretty good as long as they don't get killed from their low armour. Are they more in line with these teams than they are with these? And then I've moved Snotlings and Goblins back into the stunted tier because although they've got better, are they enough to be on a par with these? I'm not sure. So just an alternative list. Then there's list 3, which sees me perhaps taking into account some of the nerfs and boosts to some of the more bashy teams that maybe I've undervalued. So in this one, I've swapped Bretonians and Nurgle because I thought, well, actually a Nurgle might be at a better starting foundation now. Black Orcs I've moved up because of their ability to secure the ball and their access to Devious. Dark Elf and Norse I've moved back into that middle category. And Skaven I've dropped because, again, I'm one of the few people who are still rooting for the Skaven to be where they were. Chaos Dwarfs we know are unpopular with some people, so I thought maybe they could feature in this slightly lower part of tier 2. And the Dwarves as well, for the same reason as the Skaven, really, as that's where a lot of people have lost hope and think they lie. And again, the 5 stunted teams. And then for fun, I've done a community list. So this is the list that, if you listen to every single person in the community, where the teams would sit. So over here, you can see all the teams, apparently, that Games Workshop have ruined with this new rule set. So at some point, I've heard people either through Discord, the Facebook group, telling me in person that these teams are dead. And that's the word I hear used sometimes. Dead. Unplayable, I've heard. Broken. Not in a good way. Pointless. That was Skaven, wasn't it? It's Skaven are pointless now because you can just be Underworld. So this is me taking into account all of them, what they said. And then you've got the remaining stunties. Then you've got teams that people haven't whinged about too much, and so they just exist. And then you've got this is the meta now. So if you don't pick one of these teams, you may as well not bother. So the big cross through all of these. It's just about this. It's just about these 5 teams now. That is Blood Bowl. It's Amazons versus Necro versus OWA versus Underworld versus Vampire. That's it. Now I am, of course, only having a light-hearted poke at the community, because I don't think this is true, and I don't think anybody quite thinks it's true. Of course, it's the dwarf players who are so depressed about where the dwarves are, so that they think they're well, not all of them, I will add. Some dwarf players are, relishing the chance to do something a bit different. But let's say you are a dwarf player who's very disappointed. It doesn't necessarily mean that you think all these other teams are down there as well, because you're only focused perhaps on your team. And that is the case for all of these. And none of this is true. This is just me having a bit of fun. It does highlight, though, that if everybody was right with their thoughts, particularly the negative ones, you'd end up with a very small game. And who knows, maybe it will be that these 5 teams are going to be the dominant force going forward. But I don't think so. So I'll revert back to my original thoughts. This is where I think roughly the teams lie. I'm not an expert. It may be completely different to this. There may be some things I'm missing. Really, you could put Amazons in a place. All of them are on their own. Maybe Undead I'm overvaluing a bit. Who knows? And really, the great thing about Blood Bowl is I still believe that certainly any of these teams can quite happily compete with each other at low TV and at tournament level. Surely there's going to be teams that are a bit better set up for these tournaments than others, but I still think you could see any of these teams winning tournaments. And that includes Goblins. I mean, I've seen Goblins win a tournament in the old edition. So if they could win it in the old edition, they can definitely win it in the new. Same with the Gnomes, I suppose. Yes, and maybe even these as well. Who knows? Okay, so final thoughts on roster and rule changes. So I had a really good point from Uni3106 in the comments, who said that he wants to hear some final thoughts, and he asked me a bunch of questions as a way of summing up what I think about the changes. And I thought, you know what a great idea. I'll use your questions, and we'll talk about the rules changes and the rosters. So thank you, Uni3106, for that. Let's go through them. So question 1 was, do you feel like Bash or Agility benefited more from these changes? And you started off with a really difficult question there. I definitely think Bash won in 2020. And when I say won, I mean the rules kind of lent into them a little bit more. With the nerfs we saw to passing and the boosts to things like fouling, I just felt that really played more into the Bash meta, which is why we saw a lot of Bash teams on Blood Bowl 3 initially, and you'd see quite a few of them at tournaments. So yeah, I don't think actually you didn't necessarily see them loads at tournaments, but I'd come to face them a lot. It seemed to be like everyone's fallback option is to run one of the high armoured Bash teams. This edition, I think with the boosts to small boost to passing, and but they are trying to encourage different ways to play. Actually, even though this is the first question, I think I'm going to duck out of that one because I really can't decide whether this is Bash focused or Agility, because we've seen Agility teams like Elven Union and Dark Elves potentially lose out, but we've also seen Bash teams like Dwarves and Chaos Chosen perhaps taking a bit of a hit as well. So I don't know is the honest answer. I'm just hoping that it's balanced between the two, and that there's things that the Agility teams can do to win games, but there's also things that the Bash teams can do, because that's all you want really from the games. So the next question, in general, do you identify any themes to these changes which might push the meta in a certain direction? I do. So I think one is cage breaking. I think they're looking at ways to help players to unlock cages in order to move away from stalling and the 2-1 grind. So throw teammate now is more viable to break into cages. You've got break tackle, which will help you break into cages. Obviously, we already had things like hypno gaze. So there are several ways now to break into those cages, and this will be the first edition in a while where a cage, quite tight cage, will not feel as safe as it used to. And that plays in with the stalling as well, because even though the stalling rule itself, once you're getting on towards the end of a half, it's not really the end of the world, the stalling rule. It's unlikely that it's going to come to bite you in the backside. But if you're screening or caging, you are inviting the opportunity that the opposition team might sack the ball. And if it's easy to break through cages and screens, that might put some people off stalling more, and people might just take the touchdowns where they can get them. We won't know, but I do think that's one direction the meta has been pushed in, that they're trying. Whether they succeed or not is a different matter, but I think they're trying to make games more fluid, get people to score when they can as opposed to when they want to. And we'll have to see if that bears fruit. With so many buffs to passing, do you foresee it being a more integral part of average team strategy or simply less crazy than it used to be? I think it will be less crazy than it used to be. And for the average team, I don't think you're going to see necessarily much more passing. But this links into what I said about the stalling and the cage breaking. Now, screens and cages are going to be a little bit less safe. That might push people into releasing the ball and passing it a bit more because they want to move it to areas of the pitch quite quickly that they know that they could stall for a bit or they could score and reset the board. I think a little bit more passing might come around, not necessarily because passing is a lot better, but because holding onto the ball behind a cage is less safe, perhaps. So yeah, that's what I think. Do you think teams losing the option to run 4 of certain positionals, your Dark Elf Blitzers and your Gutter Runners, will homogenise the game, or do the other positionals and skills make up for it? Oh, this is a tricky one because there's a lot of people who believe that the other positionals and the skills don't make up for it. But I genuinely don't believe that will homogenise the game. I still think there's great variance between the teams. Um, I don't believe in this chatter that just because a lot of teams are now 2 positionals for most of those positionals that will create a boring game because and make less varied rosters. Because I'll be honest, just take the Orcs for example. Orcs, because they had 2 0 to 4 positional types, there was potential there for all sorts of different varied rosters, but you didn't see those because you just end up seeing 4 blitzers, 4 big uns, or to start a league with maybe 3 blitzers and 4 big uns, or 3 big uns and 4 blitzers. But do you know what I mean? Again, Dark Elves, you didn't see too much variance in rosters anyway because people had worked out what was the best and were just running that. So I don't think it will homogenise the game. I think there'll still be some great variance. We've got, is it 30 teams now? It's certainly 29 teams, and I think it's wonderful. So no, I don't think that we'll see the game homogenise. Which positional do you think might be the most fun to use in this new edition? Well, I'm giving you some clues on this page. There's loads of positionals I'm really looking forward to using. So let's start over here. White Blitzer, what an absolute legend. Block, tackle, thick skull. He's an absolute beast now. And of course, regeneration. One of the better blitzers, I think, in the game. We've got the Skaven Blitzer here. This is a controversial pick because I know there's a lot of Skaven players very upset that they've lost their Gutter Runners. But we're talking about me now because it says, what do you think might be the most fun? And I'm looking forward to running Movement 8 Blitzers. It'll give you much more coverage across the field. It's only 1 space more of movement, but that makes a difference. That kind of speed it means you can skirt around cages faster. You can follow the Gutter Runners to support them. I'm looking forward to working out how best to use them. And of course, strip ball means that any player who's left vulnerable is going to get a whack from this guy and lose the ball. Of course, people will question, well, you won't be able to get at the ball carrier, but I don't know. In this edition, you might be able to break the cage one turn and then sack the ball the following turn because the players had to abandon their broken cage. I don't know. Just looking forward to the blitzers. The pump wagons are going to see a lot more now, which is wonderful. Secret weapon was enough really to put people off and then maybe run 0 or 1. Whereas now you may as well run them both because there's no secret weapon. It gives you that little bit more strength on the pitch. So great stuff. The assassin, the Dark Elf assassin with his hit and run. I'm looking forward to using that. The big gun is just a great player now. It starts with Mighty Blow. Still got movement 5. It's got taunt. So that'll be interesting. Really, really good. The Imperial Thrower. Passing 2+ and pro. Can't wait to see what the Imperials can do, and he's an integral part of that for me. Now, some people might think I'm trolling you by putting the dwarf blocker in, but this is counting as the OWA blocker because OWA get a blocker now, and they're not too upset that the blocker doesn't come with tackle and doesn't have strength access because the blocker they had before had armbar and brawler, whereas now they've got one with block and defensive. So I think that is another part that's really useful to the OWA team. Yeah, they've lost the strength access, but you've got that on other players in the team. So I think that'll be fun to use and to have some sturdy block players in your team. And finally, the Rot Spawn. I think the Rot Spawn is my single favourite new rule in the game, pick me up, because pick me up was not designed for a rot spawn. Pick me up was designed for the beer ball, and I love the fact that they've looked at it and they've thought, do you know what would be really cool if we had pick me up on the rot spawn, and he's like using his tentacles to grab his players and prop them back up again. I thought that was genius. And you know what? It's not going to break the game. It's not overpowered, but it will be useful to Nurgle because unlike the beer balls who can get wiped out pretty quickly, this rot spawn's probably going to stay on the field. So every turn you're going to be rolling that pick me up. So sooner or later you're going to hit that 5 or 6. And can you imagine picking up a bloater after someone's tried their hardest to get him on the floor? It's going to be absolutely infuriating for your opposition and wonderful for you. And I think it's a lovely to see the rot spawn having his day in the sun. Bless him. Do you think we'll see a migration of human and dwarf coaches to OWA? Yes, I do. Unfortunately. I say unfortunately, I've got no problem with people who want to do that. The OWA coaches from the last edition might be a bit miffed that people are jumping on the bandwagon. But you can't blame them because you are going to see the humans, for example. You're going to see a team that has a lot of similar players to your humans, but they have the added blend of some tough dwarf players, and there's just such a variety there. And the same goes for the dwarves. So I think you will see quite a few going over to OWA. There'll be some loyal who will stick to their teams no matter what. But there's going to be players out there who chase the best teams. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the way of any game. When people work out which is the best, that's what they want. If you're playing a football game, you're often going to be picking the top club sides to play with. If you're playing Call of Duty, you're going to want the best gun loadouts, and it just goes on. People are competitive and they're going to want to use the best. So yeah, I do think you'll see a migration, but hopefully there'll still be some human and dwarf players out there because variety is the spice of life. Which teams do you think will actually have the biggest popularity shifts? I've said these 8. Doesn't mean that no one's going to be playing the other teams. It just means I think these ones will see a lot of play. Amazons, because I think they'll be the best team. Underworld, because I think they'll mop up a lot of Skaven players, as well as being probably the strongest team at tournaments in the last edition. Necro, because they were already good and they've got a bit better. OWA we've already talked about. Orcs, because I think people always love Orcs, and I think people are slowly coming around to the idea that they actually haven't got that much worse, particularly when compared to other teams. So I still think you'll see loads of people running Orcs. Imperials, I think, will become the de facto human choice because I think they'll be the strongest. Plus, the team has got a lot of character, so they can back up that character now with some decent rules. Snotlings, I think more and more people are going to plough into Snotlings and Goblins for the same reasons. They can do some crazy stuff, funny stuff, and I think people will enjoy them for the fun aspect, but also they'll perform better than you think they will. So that's what I'm going for as perhaps the 8 biggest popularity shifts. When we say shifts, I know a lot of these are already popular, but I think they'll get more popular. People have generally focused their concerns on certain nerfs, but are there any buffs you're concerned with? Yes. So break tackle on the blocker. That's a real worry, because stat ups are easier now. So can you imagine a Amazon blocker that got strength 5 or edge 2+? Then you're adding your break tackle onto that. And then you're adding the fact that when she gets there, she's strength 4. So can probably get a 2 die. And she's got dodge to re-roll that cage dive. They were already really strong without that input. So I don't know how they'd address that buff, but I do think that's a buff that worries me. And it's going to make Amazons really potent, I think. OWA, I'm really pleased for them, and I'm hoping that they just play as a really, really good side. But there's always a chance that they've given them too much and they'll become a bit broken. We'll have to wait and see. I don't think so personally, but that if I had to pick another buff that concerns me a little bit, it would be that. And the same goes for Underworld with the fact that they've already shown themselves to be the best low TV and tournament team, and then you go and boost them by taking all of the pros that Skaven got, and none of the negatives really. So those are the only buffs I'd say I'm concerned about. Everything else I think is very welcome. Which team's flavour or fun factor has been most improved in this edition? Here they come again, Old World Alliance. I think somebody in the comments of mine said how they've always liked OWA, but it kind of sapped the fun out of the fact that they knew that there was such a difficult team to get something out of. Whereas now they can actually enjoy playing their favourite team, which I think is wonderful, isn't it? So yeah, definitely think OWA will be more fun because they're going to be more competitive. Goblins, I think, although they were already fun, they're going to be even more fun now. For a similar reason that they're not just going to suck. They're actually going to be able to do some stuff as well. But you'll still be able to do all the crazy shenanigans. And I've put Orcs because I think they're in a interesting spot. Their flavour has changed a little bit. And I think you can do some of the stuff you used to do with your Orc linemen on strength access. But again, it'll cost money if you're going to whack things like guard and block on them. So, yeah, I think people are going to have a lot of fun unlocking what the Orcs can do. If a newcomer was starting with this edition, what teams might you recommend? So I've put down Undead, Orcs, and Bretonnians. Undead because I still think they're a great base starting team. Not too many complicated rules, and they've just got strength in all areas, and they're just a good side. And I think people would enjoy playing them. Orcs, a little bit more complicated than they used to, but I still think they're a very forgiving early team. They've got a lot of high armour, they've got block pieces, they can carry the ball, and so I just think they're very solid and nice for people to get into. And I think the new Bretonnian team could be a good beginner team because a lot of the players are similar, so you're not having to learn drastically different player types. There's a lot of the same skill being used by all those players. And the humans, people identify with humans. Humans and orcs always used to be the automatic beginner sides that people would think of. So Bretonnians orcs might be the new way of doing that, as the humans might have become a bit more of a challenge to play in this edition of the rules. What balance changes are we most likely to see after release? So these aren't necessarily the most likely, but they're things that might be considered. Halflings, have they been too harsh on them? I certainly think so. Could they give them access to devious skills? I don't know. Could they change the star player access possibly? Just a couple of things maybe that could just boost them back up. Can we do something about the break tackling Amazon blocker? I don't know what you'd do. Because I think if you turn them back to strength 3, there'd be an absolute uproar from the teams. I'm not saying you do that, but we need to find some way of making it a little bit harder for the Amazons to smash into your cages. Please put the human thrower back to 2+. Don't know why he went down to 3+. Or explain to me why. If you can explain to me why, and I can make sense of it, then fair enough. But that's a buff. Not a buff. That's a change I'd like to see reverted at some point. Not saying that we will. Underworld. Why have I put Underworld in here? I can't remember now. I just don't like Underworld. You've got to ban them. That's what I want to see. No, I'm only joking. I don't hate them. But I don't see why I put them in here. I can't remember now. Maybe it'll come to me after this. And then the ogre, he needs some changes because on the human team he can mutate. On the renegade team he's got no mighty blow. So there's clearly some issues with the ogre, and so they just need to tidy that up. Maybe the human ones, it's designed that they have mutations. Maybe they're going for the whole two-headed ogre aesthetic. I don't know, but we'll see. I still think that might be a typo. So yeah, those are the changes after release I can see them thinking about. This one I don't think will happen. I think it's the only changes you can make to it could either end up affecting break tackle, which people would be disappointed with because it only just changed, or you might have to tone down the blockers themselves, and I don't see them doing that either. But some of the others I can see them making some changes on. And that is it. So those are my final thoughts on Blood Bowl and the rules changes. On the whole, I'm quite pleased. There's things we're going to have to wait to see play out once we start playing the games. If we go back to where I think the power levels roughly are, I think that's fairly good going forward. Still think anywhere in the top 4 groupings here that you'd have a competitive game. But we'll have to wait and see. That's it then. The final roster chat we'll have. Next time I'll do a roster video will be when we're going in depth more, and we'll look at different roster builds, player progression, look at inducements and any other aspects that can help people to run a team. And each and every team, they will not be coming out as quick as these ones, I can tell you that. It won't be a 3 in a day job. And I want to have a good look at the rule book first. But yeah, anyway, that's a nice way to end my run on my actual birthday. So yeah, happy birthday to me. And this is on Sunday the 9th. And yeah, I hope everyone has a great weekend and are looking forward to getting their hands on the Season 3 box set if they haven't already. If you have managed to get your hands on it, well done, you guys. If, like me, you're waiting at some point this week to receive it, I hope you have a great time with it. And yeah, I'll see you on the Blood Bowl pitch, hopefully, at some point in the future, whether that be digitally or in person. Right, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you ever so much for all the likes and the subscribes during the last couple of weeks. And I'll see you all on the next video. Thank you very much, and bye for now.